Howdy folks, it's Adriel the Hunting Gear Guy. Today I wanted to talk about the cheapest stove you can get on eBay. This is a little canister stove. It was $6 US, I believe, free shipping. And it runs on your standard propane, isobutane style canisters. And a couple people had some reviews on these, but the video quality wasn't very good, or the audio wasn't very good, or they didn't talk about the stuff I wanted to, so I thought I'd mention this thing. Now, one thing I wanted to start off with, I think there's actually a couple different versions of this thing. They kind of fan out the holders like that, the pot holders like that. And the reason why I think there's a couple of different versions, one, these are really stiff and difficult. And then the other, if you take a look at that, you can see that that's stamped. And I think in some of the images that I've seen, it's cut. See how those are, they're kind of rolled over there and it's stamped. And it makes for this thing, it's kind of crappy, like folding them in and out. There's a lot of like grit. I don't know if you can hear that, but a lot of grit trying to move these things back and forth. Now, if you had some time, you could probably hit it with a file and clean those right up. But that is a little bit crappier. And then just generally, there's a couple of like little fit and finish issues, I guess you could say, on it that look a little bit crappy. It does look like it's got a double seal on the bottom here. I'm just looking for pin or something like that. So we've got a rubber seal on the outside right there, and then we've got one right on the shoulder right there. Now that said, when I unscrew it from the canister, it sounds like there's still gas escaping from it within here. So I don't know if that inner seal is working or if it's just relying on this outside shoulder seal here. Now the $6 stove comes with this little orange plastic carrier. Mine had a little bit of flashing on here, so it's a little bit sharp. And again, clean it up with a knife, get a knife out and clean it up. It'd be nice if they did it at the factory, but it's $6, so they're not going to put the time in to do that. You can see it fits in like that. And as you pull it out, this control arm is spring loaded and it just wants to pop out just like that. Then to deploy, we're just going to rotate these guys around. And if you want to throw these pot holders on the outside, you can, just like that. And I'll show you on this pot here. These things aren't even close to level. There's no way. It's super wobbly on there. I'm going to go ahead and just screw it into this big canister just because it lasts forever and it's easier to do that. I just heard it pop and then get gas into that middle area there. All right, here I've got the stove out, and you can kind of see these legs here don't go completely flat. The other issue I had is that some of them were not quite straight, so I actually just bent it. This steel is very soft and it's easy to bend. I'm actually going to heat this thing up and see if I can't bend it while it's hot. Oh, see, that one's a little bit cockeyed. Let's move that one over. There we go. Again, it's just very soft, so it's very easy to do that. Now I'm just going to fire this thing up, put a pot of water on it, and see if these legs get melty when they get hot, because that's one issue that I've heard. Now, the one nice thing about this thing, it's got a piezo on there, so you don't need to carry a lighter, but you should anyways. There we go. And one interesting thing about this stove is that it's regulated, so you can turn it way down and it'll just keep going just like that. So if you've had an unregulated stove like this Optimus Crux over here, the gas pressure will drop pretty quickly off the hop, and that one will slowly die out, whereas this one is running just fine. So even though this is a very cheap stove, it's still working fine for that. This would actually be really good if you don't need to just boil water, but you also want to put stuff on simmer, cook stuff slowly. This stove would do okay. One thing, I don't know if the video is picking this up, but the flame is uneven. to be nice to it, it's kind of just all over the place. And you can see that as it gets bigger, there are some definite weirdness going on with that flame pattern, and that starts to show up when you start to boil water as well. Let me just get it nice and low there. Stick a pot on. You can kind of see that it's not super stable. Even with those legs out, it's not stable, and the reason is this thing is not level. It's not level. It's not completely straight, and the legs aren't even with each other. So it's just always going to be out of balance, like a chair with one leg that's a little bit too short. I'm just going to get that thing centered. There we go. Now, one issue, I thought this stove would be good for this because it focuses a lot of the flame in the middle. But just because of how it's designed, you can't actually get it like really cranking without sending a lot of flames out the edge and just not being very efficient of it. They'll just kind of like blow out the edge there. So you do need to run it at a little bit of a slower rate, but it's still pretty efficient because you can turn it down and just walk away and just leave it, and it'll bring this thing to a boil. So I'm gonna let it bring it to a boil, and I'm gonna go grab some pliers and see if those metal supports bend when they're hot, which they shouldn't. All right, that's about as warm as the legs are gonna get. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this off of here. Let's just see if those are gonna bend on us. Nah, I don't think so. Like, they're soft. They're definitely soft arms on this thing, but they're not that bad. All right, I don't know if you can see those legs, but you can see they're kind of like, they're not fully flat. And because they're not fully flat, I mean, I could even these out here. It's still going to be a little bit off because, again, some of these legs stick up higher than others. So with them out, that's kind of the stability I'm getting. And I'm just touching this here. I'm just touching this with just like very light pressure, and it is not very stable with a lot of water in there. And one other issue that I've noticed is that this part here gets pretty warm in use. That heat's going to get down into our bottle. That could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. Depends on your situation. I just want to let you guys know. The other thing I noticed is that some of these on eBay and Amazon have nicer holes drilled, and some of the different finishes look a little bit nicer than this one. Again, this is the cheapest one you can get. Now, in terms of compactness, the $6 eBay special is pretty good. It does fold down fairly well, and it does give us a fairly compact package. If you end up putting it in the box, it takes up a little bit more space that maybe you wouldn't need to take up because there's a little bit of dead space in there. I guess if you really wanted to, you could stick your backup lighter in there as well, and at least have a secondary source of flame if your piezo goes on this thing, which I would imagine it would at some point, but not too bad. The other thing that's really great with this is that the weight is fairly good. So this guy here is rated at 83, and I think it's like 86 or so. 90, come on, give me a rating. There's 87. Whereas if I put this guy on there, 95, it's not that bad. It's not that heavy, considering we're gaining that piezo use there, and a regulated stove that you can walk away from, and it'll still cook at that same rate without without dying super quickly. So that is really nice. So would I recommend getting this $6 eBay stove? If you don't have a lot of money, sure, I guess, why not? It's only $6. I would have some concerns around some of the durability on the parts. Like I showed you, the flame pattern out of it looks like it's super concentric and it'll work, but just with this kind of thing, you probably need some decent precision to get the flame coming out of it to be uniform. And this is not done to a certain level of precisions, but it only matters a little bit. I don't think it would matter a whole heck of a lot. The holders aren't fantastic. That's the bit that I don't really like, because if you were to use this and you weren't on a perfectly level surface, you might actually have to end up rotating your fuel can to get it to where it's kind of level, kind of level. And these little legs here don't really help that much. I mean, I got just as much stability from them in than out. I suppose out if you had like a really big container, but if you're just running like a little pot or something like that, I would just run them in, and they're fine like that. I think if you put a little bit of time into it with a file, you might be able to knock off some of these edges and get it to work a bit better. And if you had a little bit more time, you could also bend these little tabs to where it sits flat, and it works better for you. They might bend back, or they might bend some other way later on, but at least it'll be a little bit flat for you for a little bit, right? Ultimately, I think a stove like this shouldn't really be your primary stove. You should probably look at something a little bit better. But if you need like a backup or something like that, or you like using canisters just for regular car camping and that kind of thing, where you're not going to be out in the middle of the wilderness and too hard up, it wouldn't be a bad little like backup stove, because it does work for what it does, and does have that really nice fine adjust simmer ability that was really nice. So if you need to cook stuff at a little bit of a lower temperature, or if you need a backup stove, you might want to check out the crappy $6 eBay stove. Thanks for watching.